Welcome on the Cosmic Atom. This was never arbitrary. You did not simply chance to be there. There was no coincidence, no luck, no accident. Something drew you, and not with words, but with a power from inside your spirit. A gentle pull led you to a soul that was gradually shattering. A light is nearly gone. They did not yell. They did not ask, but they have not listened. And while everyone else continued going, you paused, even if you didn't know why, even if it didn't make sense, because your soul saw something that no one else could. A presence, a call, a quiet cry, buried under a flawless disguise. There were no indicators in the skies. There are no voices in the breeze. But you knew. You didn't plan this. You did not ask for this. However, your spirit has already said yes since you picked one. We're dispatched, sent at the perfect time, not to preach or repair, but to testify and carry out a mission that no one else could. A mission that would need you to pour light into a vessel that had forgotten its pure nature in order to rescue a fallen angel in quiet, without recognition or glory, but with purpose. This is no coincidence. This is not just a video. This is a confirmation. You have no idea what caused that calm fire in your breast. Then you already know. Comment 99 below. Not for me, but as a spiritual confirmation to heaven that you receive the word. Mark your agreement by like this video. Subscribe if you realize your trip isn't over, since what comes next was planned long before you were here. And now it's time to remember why you were sent. They weren't just a buddy. They weren't just a stranger, a partner, or a fleeting acquaintance. No, they were a heavenly connection put on your path with surgical precision by unseen hands that you had always sensed. You did not meet them. Your soul has been sent to them. In addition, there is the assignment. It was not printed in a letter. It did not come with instructions. There was no angel standing at your door saying, "This one is sacred. Protect them." But deep down, you knew there was something in them. Something sacred. Nonetheless, he is injured. A voice that once sang like paradise. Now it's just whispers and stillness. You heard them even when they didn't say anything. You felt their conflicts and sensed their shadows. Even when they smiled, you could see the fissures. Meanwhile, everyone else believed the mask. You read the soul. This was not empathy. This was not compassion. It was an alignment. You were not just being polite. You were on assignment. And here's the secret. Few will comprehend. Your spirit agreed to the deal before you were born, even before you breathed your first breaths. This connection, purpose, and soul were inscribed into your destiny. That is why you were unable to look away. That's why walking away felt wrong, even while your intellect pleaded for quiet. Because this was not about reasoning. This was about divine orchestration. A message from heaven concealed behind your compassion. They didn't beg for help. They did not call out for rescue. The Almighty, however, heard their stillness, and you were sent as an answer, not with loud words or preaching, but with presence. Because sometimes God does not send preachers. He sends presence, heart, and light. You did not repair them. You anchored them. You did not update them. You reminded them of who they were. They remain who they are. You created room for a light that everyone else considered a problem. You guarded a flame that was almost extinguished. And this is where the enigma thickens. Why you? Why did you feel such a strong sense of urgency for someone you hardly knew? Why did your spirit jump even when your head whispered, "Let it go"? Why did they emerge in your life at the same time as your own world was shaking? Because it wasn't just about them. It was about you. The objective was to awaken, not just rescue. Heaven knew that if you could see the divine in a fallen angel, you'd see the divine in yourself. It was a mutual ignition. One soul flickers in stillness, while another carries fire. And when you met, the spark reignited. However, it goes deeper, because what if the quiet soul you saved wasn't the only one allocated to you? What if this was only the first ripple in a far bigger plan? What if you've been doing this all along without realizing it? What if another soul is going to cross your path, waiting for your light? Stay with me again, because what happens next may challenge everything you thought you understood about your history, relationships, and purpose. The indicators were always present. You simply didn't realize what you were seeing until now. They did not yell. They did not beg. They did not collapse in public for everyone to watch. They just faded into the background, behind nice smiles, faded into a life that seemed great on the surface but was oppressive on the inside. It was not a loud fall. It was a quiet drop. Nobody noticed since it wasn't very dramatic. But you did, because what others viewed as strength, your soul recognized. Survival does not equal peace. Is camouflage. They were never fine. They were just undetectable in plain sight. A once radiant spirit is now tarnished by the weight of a world that has never understood them. You could sense it before they spoke a single word. That anguish, that slight flash beneath their eyes, said, "I used to believe in something greater, but now I'm just trying to make it through the day." This wasn't just depression. This wasn't just sorrow. This was a heavenly person separated from their own light. A heavenly mission shattered by rejection, muffled by treachery, and buried under expectations that were never intended for them. They were not designed for this planet. That is why it broke them. They whispered softly, moved lightly, and dreamt madly in quiet. And yet, everything around them implored them to halt, dull, blend, and conceal what was sacred. So they stopped gleaming, not because they weren't deserving, but because no one informed them their wings might still expand until you. You saw it, right? That spiritual remnant in their energies, that anguish that was unrelated to this world. That purity looked old and unearthly. This was not simply a person. This was an angel who had forgotten who they were. Heaven sent you to discover them, not repair them, because angels do not always descend with fire and thunder. Sometimes they fall silently, in gradual, unseen suffering. And when they do, God does not send in an army. He sends a witness, a comrade, a soul similar to yours. You were the one who recognized what others overlooked. You sensed the contradiction and picked up on heavenly messages in their laughter, uncertainty, and longing for something they couldn't identify. They didn't know how to seek for assistance. You didn't need them to, because it was not about words. This was about acknowledgement, spirit to spirit, light to light. And now for the big reveal. What if this angel didn't fall by accident? What if the fall was part of a greater plan? What if they had to fall so you could remember why you were sent? Saving them allowed you to see yourself. You recalled the times. You died silently when your wings were cut by the weight of the world. And suddenly, it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the two of you. Two heavenly lights meet, not in perfection, but in divine collision. And now, heaven has something to show you. Something about why this angel appeared in your life at that very time. Something you could not have expected, but it will make everything clear. Stay with me, for what follows will shift your perspective on every soul you've ever born. The truth is emerging, and you're smack in the middle of it. They had nearly persuaded themselves that God had forgotten them, that maybe they were too shattered, too far gone, or too abandoned to be remembered. They grinned in public and laughed when they had to perform their parts. But deep down, they were unwinding from tiredness rather than fury. The silent type that whispers, "Maybe I wasn't supposed to make it." They were not upset with God. They were alienated and spiritually numb, fighting battles nobody could see, and they were quietly wondering why heaven had become so quiet. Where are the answers? The indicators have a function. They prayed earnestly, but nothing happened. So they halted. They stopped asking. I stopped hoping. I stopped thinking that anybody would come. And that's when you appeared, not with fire or thunder, but with presence, gentleness, and light. You did not come to execute a miracle. You became the miracle, the craziest portion. You didn't realize you were doing it. You've just spoken. You've just heard. You simply showed up. But in doing so, you resurrected something people believed was long dead. You were more than simply a comfort. You were evidence that God had never abandoned them. Proof that their wordless cries had reached heaven. And your arrival? It was not arbitrary. You did not find them. You were sent to them at the precipice of that perilous, hallowed moment between submission and collapse. At the very time they whispered, "God, if you still see me, please provide a sign." You were the solution. Heaven did not send a sermon. He did not send lightning. He sent you not to correct their theology or to save them with beautiful words, but to serve as a reminder that someone still recognizes the beauty they have buried. That person still acknowledges the holy light inside them. Someone still cares. Because when individuals lose faith, they do not need to be preached to. They should be seen. And that is what you did. You did not attempt to modify them. You reminded them of their own identity. You saw brightness under their ashes. You chatted with the royalty buried under the debris. That scared them because they couldn't believe a stranger could look at their brokenness and call a holy. How could someone come into their darkness and behave as if it were still sacred ground? But that's precisely what occurred without anybody noticing it. You transformed into a lighthouse, not yelling with a megaphone, but just standing, blazing, rooted. And from the outside, it seemed to be a simple exchange, discussion, gesture, or moment. But on the inside, their whole world started to change. Their hearts murmured, Maybe I'm not invisible. Perhaps God still has his eyes on me. Maybe it's not the end." And at that little instant, faith flared anew. It wasn't a fire yet, but it was sufficient. Enough for one more step. Enough to raise their heads. Enough to breathe again. Not simply to live, but to remember. And now for the question that haunts the stillness. What if that one instant spared their fate? What if their narrative, which would have stopped there, is now just starting because you followed a pull you didn't even comprehend? What if God didn't simply send you to rekindle someone else's faith, but also to awaken your own calling because something is coming up? A moment that will not only verify all you've ever felt, but also reveal how many lives depend on your obedience. You were directed to one, but what if this was just the beginning? Stay with me, because what you're going to discover will reframe every relationship you've ever questioned and reveal the true reason heaven continues bringing specific folks into your life. There is something about you that you can never describe. You've always strolled through life, experiencing everything. Not only do you feel suffering, but so do others. Not simply your feelings, but those that sprang out of nowhere. Heavy waves, quiet storms, and imperceptible waiting. You felt melancholy without a tale. You sensed fights that you couldn't identify. You carried pain you did not earn. And for a long time, you wondered, what is wrong with me? However, there was nothing wrong with you. There was something holy about you. Because what you considered a hardship was really proof of your task. You were not born to blend. You were created to feel, carry, heal, and intercept while others wandered through life unaffected. You stepped through it and activated. Your heart functioned like a radar, taking up signals that no one else detected, sensing things they couldn't see, feeling a room move, and knowing when a soul close by was quietly screaming. You attempted to ignore or shrug it off, but the sensitivity remained. That's because it wasn't sensitive. It was spiritual equipment. You were wired for an invisible purpose, a calling that needed you to sense deeper than the surface. That's why you couldn't sit still in places that seemed artificial. Why did you feel fatigued after short talk? Why did you feel attracted to certain individuals but repulsed by others, even if they had never mistreated you? Your spirit was reading things your intellect couldn't comprehend since you don't just exist. You conduct out operations. You carry something. Heaven knows it. When God assigns someone a bare light, He also grants them spiritual sensitivity that most people do not comprehend. You were never too much. You were really tuned. You were not weak. You have been sent, and that's how they discovered you. The broken, the concealed. They didn't know how to word help, but you heard them nevertheless. This is why they opened up to you. That's why they opened up in the first chat. That's why strangers felt comfortable telling you about their childhood pain, without knowing your last name, because your presence contained something holy. It didn't just listen, it healed. You were not sent to lecture them. You were sent to repair the atmosphere. The craziest part, you thought this was usual. You assumed that everyone felt the same way you did. You assumed that every spirit trembled as they passed someone in agony. But this was your gift. You're not only compassionate, you're a prophet. You don't just care, you carry. You're carrying fire. You carry breakthrough. You have heavenly understanding. You have the kind of presence that can shake people's shackles off without saying anything. That is why they discovered you. This is why you couldn't walk away. Even if it hurt, cost you money, or emptied you, you should turn up again. Because your soul recognized the task. You did not remain because it was easy. You remained because it was ingrained in your nature. And here's where something within you will split open. What if you've been unconsciously carrying the weight of your anointing? What if every feeling you referred to as a floor was instead a frequency precisely tuned to divine encounters? What if the one thing that made you feel different throughout your life was proof that you were chosen? Because once you see it, once you know this isn't just random sensitivity, but a divine plan, you'll stop apologizing for who you are. You'll stop attempting to dull the gift and start walking with the confidence of someone who understands they've been allocated. Here's the most important portion. There's more to your life. Add another layer, another weight, another task is already on its way to you. You don't know it yet, but it's on the way. And when it comes, you'll need everything you've been carrying thus far. Because the next soul that comes isn't just broken. They're also picked, but they forgot. And heaven is counting on you to help them remember. Are you ready? Because what follows will put your faith in your sensitivity, purpose, and legacy to the ultimate test. There are no accidents in heaven's construction. There are no lost moments, random meets, or accidental discussions. We prefer to call it a coincidence, because it is simpler to believe in the chaos of the cosmos than to recognize the terrible beauty of divine orchestration. However, your actions were predetermined. Your timing was divine, and that soul you met was not a detour. That was the mission. They were not just part of your day. They were a chapter in your scroll, a pre-written page for your purpose. And although you may have felt uneasy, embarrassed, or unprepared when you met them, paradise was not. Heaven understood just what it was doing. You did not come early. You were not too late. You entered that moment at the very second infinity had marked in red. You believed you were just being nice, simply being accessible. However, you were fulfilling a celestial alignment. That soul, that angel, had fallen softly and lost their path. The light that was flickering out was not an interruption in your voyage. They were the cause behind it. Because what you rescued was more than just one individual. You saved a route. You saved a future. You reached into the murk of spiritual disorientation and brought someone back to clarity, back in alignment, back in their natural essence. And here's what most folks overlook when they begin their task. You do not just touch your life. You alter timelines. You realign destinies. You modify the lineages. You disrupt generational patterns. You didn't see the waves, but heaven saw, because the person you saved was carrying others. And as their light turned back on, they became a light for others. That one chance moment served as the miraculous tipping point for a whole chain reaction of healing. And you thought it was little, but it was never little. It was strategic. Your presence was the precise medication their soul needed. Not because you were flawless, but because you were accessible. Because your soul responded to call, your lips remained silent. That's what made it so effective. You did not force anything. You had no influence over the result. You just turned up in obedience to something you couldn't even identify. But God knew what happened before any of you were born. He knew precisely where they were going to fall, and he knew just who could contact them. Not the most vocal, educated, or eloquent, but the most chosen you. Because God knew this soul was on the verge of closing the door for good. When the stillness got oppressive, you would enter. Not by chance, not by coincidence, but by divine plan. You were not an answer to their prayers. You were the solution to God's plan. And this is why you couldn't ignore it. That is why it kept pulling on your heart. That is why you couldn't just let go when others advised you to. Because your soul remembers what your mind forgets. This did not happen at random. This was holy. And now, when you reflect on every moment, every whisper, every inexplicable draw towards someone you didn't know how to assist, are you beginning to see it? Patterns, settings, and strategies. You didn't merely wander into their storm. You were appointed to carry heaven with you. And here's something even more astounding. If paradise was always this purposeful, what does it imply about what comes next? Because this was not a one-time operation. This was training. This was activation. This was God unveiling your purpose in a world desperate for light. And just when you believe the job is over, the true mission starts. Another time is already shaping, and another soul is being prepared. Guess who is being positioned for it? You prepare for what comes next will need more of your light, fearlessness, and divine knowledge than ever before. But this time, you'll arrive knowing who you are. You aren't merely a helper. You aren't merely a healer. You're more than simply a good spirit passing by. You're a plan in motion. This was never simply a minute. It was never simply a video. This was a summons. If anything inside you is burnt, broken, or woken, it is because your soul remembers. You have always known. Deep down, beyond reasoning, beyond language. You were never ordinary. You didn't just pass through suffering. You felt it. You heard it in quiet. You saw everything through eyes that claimed everything was all right because you had been sent, planted, positioned, and concealed in plain sight until the appropriate soul need your light. And suddenly the curtain has removed. The truth is now out loud. You were not the one in need. You were tasked with bringing to life what others had buried in order to love, what others have abandoned, to stand between collapse and salvation and declare, "Not on my watch." It was never a coincidence. It was a strategy. It was trust. God chose you. So the question is no more, why am I feeling so much? Why am I attracted to the broken? Why am I caring so much for people I hardly know? No. Now that I know who I am, how will I walk? Because you have been activated, awakened, confirmed. Didn't you imagine it? You are not being too sensitive. Heaven has spoken, and this is an echo of your cry. So do you hear me? The chosen one. You're carrying fire. You carry alignment. You have answers for souls that do not even know what they are looking for. You're not weak. You're hardwired for conflict, the sort that battled with presence, elegance, and heavenly weight rather than with noise. So rise. Now move and talk differently. Consider every meeting from this point forward as heavenly. Because it is. Because you are. And if your spirit is raging. Yes, right now. If something eternal inside you is just frozen in place, do not remain mute. Please comment below. I was sent, and I remember why. Let heaven see it. Let the darkness quake. Let the next assignment know you're coming. And if you find this word, please share it with someone whose light is flickering. They may not realize it yet, but you may be their confirmation. This is not the end. This is the activation. Now go and carry the fire. Adjust the atmosphere. Move like the one who was sent. Because you are. You always will be. Dear viewers, your support through Super Chat and membership is the only source of income that keeps this channel running. If you want me to continue uploading valuable content without delays and to stay motivated in providing you with the best wisdom, I need your help. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Feel free to donate and support Pure Wisdom so we can keep growing together. Your generosity keeps this journey alive.
If you're enjoying the content on Pure Wisdom and find value in the messages we share, I encourage you to subscribe. Based on the latest analytics, 93.9% of viewers are watching without subscribing. By subscribing, you not only stay updated with new content, but also support the channel's growth, allowing us to continue spreading wisdom for the chosen ones. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an important message. Let's build this community together.